In today's video, I am getting comfortable at home taking macro splash photos just like these. I've done splash photography before on this channel and I was quite pleased with some of the results that I got. But the setup took me a whole weekend to do. I took thousands and thousands of photos and only got a small handful that I actually liked. And the reason is because I did it the manual way. I literally just had a small pipette of liquid and I manually just put a few drops down into the water and tried to time my photo. It was a super rough approach and the result is that I just wasted a lot of time not getting any shots at all. So I've made one key upgrade to my setup. And it's just here. So this is the Miops Splash water drop kit. Now, for those of you who've done quite a bit of water drop photography before, you will be familiar with this already. Essentially what this is just a tank that contains a liquid of your choice, and it allows that liquid to be dropped at set intervals. Because with some of the best splash photography, it's not just one droplet hitting the water, it's one droplet coming down and creating a little bit that comes up, and then a second droplet colliding with that, and that's what creates those great splash crowns that you might have seen. But getting that timing of those two droplets just right and making it repeatable is very, very tricky to do. But you can control the water drop kit just using an app on your phone, and you can set exactly what those intervals should be, as well as how big you want the water droplets to be. So as a result, when you press go and it drops a couple of droplets, you're gonna get a repeatable splash. So while last time I did this, I took maybe 3,000 or 4,000 photos and I got only 2 or 3 that I liked, with this sort of setup, I can literally just go, and I've already got a shot that I think looks pretty cool. So if it's that easy, let me take you through the setup that I've actually got here. Of course, we've got the actual water drop kit itself, which I have just attached to a pretty standard flash boom arm using a clamp. And the water droplets are dropping into this see-through Pyrex bowl. It's the biggest one I could find in my kitchen, and that's giving me a lot of room for the droplets to fall in and for me to hopefully get a nice composition around them. I am using flash for this. Predominantly it will be my Godox AD100, which as you can see I've got in a very technical setup balanced on an empty pint glass. So I will say that while it's easy now for me to start taking photos, it has taken me quite a while to get this setup together and to play around with the settings in the Miops app to get the water droplet size and also the delay at the right point where I'm pretty consistently getting the sort of splashes that I want. I basically spent all yesterday evening, probably about 5 hours, I suppose, of just playing around with different things, playing around also with the different consistencies of liquid, just to try and start getting the shots that I think are looking pretty decent. So the actual liquid I've got in here is mostly water, but with a bit of vegetable glycerin, just to kind of thicken it up slightly to help get slightly more globules rather than sprays of water. I've added a little bit of milk in here as well, just so that the light hits it a bit better rather than it being completely transparent. And finally, I've added a bit of blue food coloring, which is just giving it the color. I've got the same liquid in the tray as I have in the drop kit itself, but I would like to experiment maybe in the future by putting a different colored water, maybe a deep red color in the water drop, in the dropper, so that it's dropping into a blue color. Because I actually managed to get a shot manually the first time around with a lovely kind of red splash in blue water, and I did that by dropping red food coloring into the blue water, and that's what gave that kind of color balance. And I really like that. I'd like to do that again, but I just don't have any red food coloring today. I've got the droplet about 2 feet above the surface of the water, and again I have had to play around with the distance for this and to make sure that the timing is all set, because obviously the higher up you have the splash unit, the longer it's going to take for those droplets to hit the water. But now I have got it set up, it's pretty easy for me to just press go and then take my photo. They're not all great, some of them are a bit misshapen, some of them look a bit weird, but sometimes I get some that look really, really cool and really artful, almost like flowers blooming. But I am still taking a bit of a manual approach when it comes to taking the photo, in two ways actually. One, there is a camera cord, this orange one right here, which comes from the splash unit and goes into my camera. Now the idea is that this should be fairly automated. The droplet will be dropping the droplets, and the timing is set on the app for the camera to automatically take the picture at the precise time. But I did find that it sometimes doesn't trigger exactly as I wanted it to, and more often than not, even though I've got my wireless trigger on my camera here, it wasn't triggering the flash when it took the photo, and as a result it was just far too dark. So I've actually found I've had the best results by simply firing the shutter at the right time when the splashes come down, and that might seem like it would be a bit of a hit and miss approach, and for the most part it is, but I reckon I'm getting about a 75% success rate, which I think is pretty decent. That one, more just a line of globules, not quite the splash crown that we're going for. So my flash is triggering wirelessly. I've got that set slightly behind the dish of water and off to one side. So it's going to be firing in to light up the splash. Now I've tried this in a number of ways. One with a light, which I've actually just got on the floor down here, firing up at my background so that I'm lighting the background, not the splash itself. So it's kind of backlighting it, almost creating more of a silhouette with the splash. And some of these I've actually really enjoyed doing, and I've particularly enjoyed converting them to black and white. They've got quite a fine art look to them. But what I'm going to be doing today is actually firing the flash directly at the splash, which is going to light it up, really emphasize that blue color, and is going to allow our background to fall completely to blackness. So as a result, those splashes really stand out nicely against the dark background. So let's just try another. Again, quite a messy splash, this one. Perfectly decent, but not one for my keep pile, I don't think. So I've got my camera on my tripod, I've got it in portrait orientation, and that kind of makes sense to me because the splash is really quite tall and thin, so by having it in portrait is really capturing as much of the upwards nature of the splash as possible. I've got it manually focused. Now I did a little test by dropping the droplets into the water and then focusing on that point where they impacted. Settings wise, because that is crucial to all of this, I'm at f/18. Now that is of course a really narrow aperture, but I'm trying to do that in order to get as much of that splash in focus as I can. If I did this at f/2.8, that central stem of the splash might be sharp, but then as the crown spreads out, it's going to completely lose focus. So a narrower aperture, hopefully, is going to get me a much sharper looking splash. My shutter speed is at 200th of a second, but to be honest, that's pretty irrelevant because it's not the shutter speed that captures the splash in its pristine motion. It's actually the burst of flash that freezes that motion. For example, if I took this shot without any flash at all, we can see that we've got basically a black frame, or at least a very dark frame, and the only light that's coming in is because I've got this large video LED. If I turn this off, you probably can't see me anymore, but if I take that shot again, there we go, an even blacker frame. You see my point. So because I have just got a pure black frame when my flash is off, I know that the only light the camera is going to be capturing is the light from my little flash. But my ISO is at 2500. Now that is quite high, but I'm doing that in order to try and get the most out of the flash while keeping it at a low power. I have that flash set to 164 power, which is quite low. The reason is because what I want from it is a very short burst of light. The more powerful you have your light, say if you are at full power, it's basically giving out light for a longer amount of time because it has to ramp up to maximum and then it has to fade away. And sure, that still only takes a fraction of a second, but it takes more time for the light to diminish at full power than it does at a lower power. And because we're trying to freeze motion like this, I want to keep this at a very low power. Okay, let's try another. Tall and thin, tiny bit of crown at the top. We can do better. But what I am particularly enjoying about this is that I've got a nice chair, I've got a nice drink, I'm actually quite comfortable, which beats the uncomfortableness that I've had in some of my recent videos. Now I've got all this set up and I know that my timing's right, my liquid is right, the colors are right, the light's in the right place. I basically just keep on trying again and again and again. So let's do another. Didn't quite get that. It's okay. Bit of a bubble looking thing at the bottom, but that's fine. I'm still taking hundreds of photos, but these are hundreds of photos where there are actually some splashes going on. So I'm able to be a lot more selective about the images that I think are good. Whereas doing it the manual way I did last time, I was happy to get anything. Let's do it again. Don't like that. Ooh, we've got this sort of interesting, almost like a figure 8 splash in the top of the frame here. Every single splash is completely different to the previous one. Every single crown that you might capture is going to be completely different. No two shots are ever going to be the same. I really enjoy that because this is a sort of setup that you could do yourself at home, but you will still get different photos to what I'm getting. Sometimes I actually do see a bit of a crown appearing, but I don't quite capture it in the right timing in the camera, which is a shame. Oh, that one I did. Yeah, it looks quite nice. I'm actually just going to increase my flash power. Ooh, that's quite a dramatic one. Ooh, and that's a fun one. Really big sort of flat looking splash in the air there. So really at this point, just going again and again, triggering the splash, taking the shot, and hoping I've got something that works. And to be fair, most of the time I don't. Or I get something that's fairly interesting looking, but it's not the big splash that we're looking for. Oh, I like that. That's a really cool crown. I do like how this sort of the milky blue stands out against the black. When the hopper and the top starts to run out, I get this big syringe and simply refill. 50 millisecond size for the first drop, 130 millisecond delay, and then a 40 millisecond size for the second drop. I'm going to make that delay a little longer, 140, so that it maybe tries to catch the splash a little higher, and I think that is working actually. That one's pretty cool. This nice sort of hovering ring of splash in the air. So now we've got that set up, what I can do, because I've got my MagMod filter system attached to the front of this light, I've also got these magnetic gels. And I've popped a red one in one, because of course if I'm colouring the light, it's going to add a big colour cast to the scene itself. So I can just pop that on, and if we try this again. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a very, very red image. I really like it. It's got quite a horror movie front cover, or maybe a horror book, because it's obviously so deep red. It could be quite blood splashes, that sort of thing. But I think it just goes to show the difference it can make when you're adding just one gel to your light source. And if you don't have MagMod gels, that's fine. You can use any kind of gel on the front to color your light. You can even just use some like colored wrap of some kind. If you go to a craft store, you can get all kinds of colored cellophane that you can basically put in front of your light, and it will add this color to it. And the difference it makes to your shots is dramatic. Let's just keep firing away. I mean, that just looks like a gross lump, doesn't it? Yeah, these look pretty fun. Oh yeah. Another nice sort of cool ring in the air sort of thing. Oh, that's nice. A great sort of contact of the splashes in midair for this one. Yeah, that looks really cool. But okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn off this light and turn on my background light. So now instead of the light hitting the splash, I've got a light down under the table firing up at my background. So it's just lighting up the background instead. Now my hope is that that's going to achieve what I was doing yesterday by getting this kind of silhouette on these splashes. So I'm just going to try this again. And indeed, yeah, I do think it looks really cool. Ooh, lovely splash there. Yeah, we've got this great floating ring. It definitely looks great against that backdrop. Again, there's not a lot of color in this now, so I'm imagining this definitely is a black and white shot. It's definitely going to need a bit of cleanup. Oh, I love that. That's really cool. I really love we've got the droplets in the middle of the frame and then that big crown on the top. This one's pretty cool as well. A bit more chaotic because there's so many individual little droplets going on. Almost looks a little bit like an image of a galaxy. Maybe I'm overthinking. I have taken a whole load of photos, but I definitely know that they are going to need quite a bit of cleanup to make them look like more polished images. So I'm going to take these over into Lightroom and into Photoshop to show you how I do just that. So I've imported all of my photos into Lightroom, as you can see. And there are loads, and as you can see, there is a whole range. I've only imported the ones that kind of sort of worked, where we've got some semblance of a splash going on, because there were so many that just to import all the photos would be a little bit of a waste of space. But then I have gone through and I've marked some up with 5 stars that I think look particularly good, and I also have begun to do some of the edits. And it's the editing that I'm going to take you through now, because to be honest, they don't need a lot of work. They're such cool looking images straight out of camera, so it really is just about cleaning things up. So I'm going to show you how I do that, and I think we'll do that on this photo. So I'm just going to select this, and just for the sake of the video, reset all the edits back to where it was, and let's take a look. So this is what it is. We've got a lovely splash on this one. I particularly like this because it kind of looks a bit like a mushroom. We've got the stem, then we've got this lovely cap on top as that water has just broken over the top of the droplets. A lovely, lovely moment. And it's pretty sharp. It could certainly be better, but it's certainly got enough detail for me to be happy with, particularly on this central stem. You can see that while this is nice and sharp, as the rim of the cap gets closer to the camera, it does slightly lose focus, and that is why having that narrow aperture is important. Anyway, let's actually dive in and do some edits on this. First of all, I'm just going to brighten it up, and I'm going to up the whites, bring down those shadows, up the contrast. We want these to be punchy. So this is going to be going hard on contrast. It's going to be going hard on clarity. That is how we're going to really bring as much as we can out of this shot. Oops, what have I done? I've already gone on to another. Back we go. Okay, so color-wise, I don't really want to do anything with the temperature, but what I'm going to do is I'm really going to increase that vibrance quite a long way. Maybe bring down the saturation just a touch to balance it. But I do want a lovely rich blue. And I'm going to go into the color mixer as well and just slightly drop that hue of the blue and maybe slightly increase for luminance, but otherwise that's pretty much it there. Now we get to the important bit, the clarity slider. Now, of course, we know that generally whacking up the clarity in photos isn't the best thing to do, particularly if you're doing things like landscapes or portraits, but in this instance, that clarity boost really makes a lot of difference. It really pulls out those details. So if I just pulse this up and down, you can see what it's doing. And as it gets further up, it really brings out the detail on this. It makes everything stand out really, really nicely. So I'm going to go really hard with this. Plus 47 and also a little bit of texture. What about a bit of dehaze? You know what? A little bit of dehaze too, plus 10. But I'm going to do a bit more of this in Photoshop. So I'm only going to go so far right now. So now we're going to do right click, edit in Photoshop, and we'll take it over there. So here we are, and first thing, as I always do, is just duplicate that layer just so I've got that original background layer as a reference point. Now, the big things that I want to do here is, first of all, get rid of all of these stray droplets. I really want it to be focused on this main splash, and everything else is just kind of confusing chaos. So I'm going to use the spot healing brush at a pretty big size and just dot our way across some of these bigger droplets. I think this might be a bit of a waste of time. Let's try this another way. Let's get the object selection, hover over this, and it has selected the mushroom, but not all of these droplets. That's fine, but it's selected most of our mushrooms. Now what I'm going to do is just take a sample of the black up here, which is quite a nice deep blue black, because I am noticing that there's a slight bit of haziness down on this left side down here, which I think is because of the position of the flash. It was maybe catching in the lens a little bit. Bring up my brush tool, larger brush size, select inverse. So now I'm selecting the whole canvas, and instead of dotting away every single little bit, I can actually paint away everything that we don't want, like so. Now, I'm not going to get too close up here just yet, because some of this stuff we might want to keep. So I'm going to deselect that now, go back to our spot removal tool, smaller size. I'm going to leave these big ones that we've got over here because they might add something to the shot, but otherwise I'm going to be just furiously clicking away on everything else around here just to get rid of it. We clean it up. So I think this is looking better already. I don't mind this little one here, and these ones on the side, again, they're adding something quite nice to the equation, so I don't want to get rid of those at all. But otherwise, that is pretty much it. I think I might spend a little bit more time just making sure that mask was neat, but otherwise, I think that is absolutely great. Now, I want to do something with the bottom section, because we've got these lines from where you can see the dish. So I'm going to get rid of that in what will hopefully be quite an easy way. I'm just going to draw a rectangular marquee over it, then switch to my patch tool, and hopefully I should just be able to drop this down here. I'm going to redo it a few times. Just keep going over it again, and now it's sort of a much smoother transition, but I'm going to come back to that in a little bit anyway and do a bit more just to kind of neaten this up so it doesn't look quite so I suppose noisy, and there's various artifacts in there that I don't love. I am going to get a slightly bigger size of my clone stamp tool though, take a reading about here, and then come down and just paint away these extraneous lines above the water line, because that's just sort of showing the back wall of the dish. We don't need that, so it's easy just to get rid of that, making sure not to paint onto this too much. So I think that looks really good, and to be honest, we are most of the way there. Quickly back to my spot healing brush tool. I'm just going to get rid of that little dot, which was the highlight from the flash. Fit back on screen. Okay, I'm going to duplicate this layer. We're going to go to the filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and I'm going to apply. Is a Gaussian blur going to do it? You know what? I'm not going to do a Gaussian blur. Filter, noise, dust and scratches. And then just up that quite a long way. It's going to look ridiculous, and that's no problem at all, because once it is applied, I am going to create a mask by clicking that button. And then I'm going to invert that mask, not that we particularly need to, but fine. And then I'm going to just brush in white, just like this. And now we've got a much smoother base for our splash, and I think that looks pretty good, just like that. Okay, so with that done, merge it down, and then I'm going to go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter. This brings up all of the same controls we have in Lightroom. First of all, radial gradient over the top of our mushroom. And I'm going to just up those whites a bit to help make it pop even more. And a bit more clarity. So it's just giving that extra little boost. And I'm going to do another one, this time with a brush, just going down the stem. Basically the same though, extra little pop of white, pop of clarity. Because again, if I just pulse this up and down, up and down, up and down, it really helps that stem stand out so nicely against that background. I mean, I love it at plus 100, to be honest, but I'm not going to go plus 100 because we've already got some on. It will start to cause some artifacts. So I'm going to keep it at plus 43. So overall, it is at essentially plus 100 on there already. So I think that looks really good, just like that. I'm not going to do anything else to it in Camera Raw filter. I am just going to get the crop tool and I'm just going to straighten up this bottom edge like that. But I have noticed that now the actual, the stem, as it were, isn't quite going straight up. So what I'm going to do is duplicate that layer again. And this time I'm going to go edit and I'm going to go puppet warp. And then we can just sort of pin these spots in. I don't think that's quite straight, like this. And then we can just grab it and drag that mushroom into position, basically just like that. Now, the puppet warp tool can be quite useful for abstract images like this because you can sort of grab it, you could move it around, you could just extend the cap a little bit. Obviously, not like this, it looks awful, but you get the idea. You can kind of mess around with the shape. So I think something like that just kind of brings the alignment back into place. So that's all it was. It's basically just tilting it. And that is everything I want to do to this image. We've just neatened it up. If we take these off, before we had this chaotic image with all these extra water droplets that just sort of distracted from the main subject in the middle. But we've cleaned it up. We've really brought that attention back to the main splash, the mushroom splash, and I think this looks really, really good. And these are the same techniques on this image that I have used on all of the other ones that I have shown in this video. It really doesn't take that long. It's just about cleaning up and adding a little bit of punch and clarity to the splash. So that brings me to an end of this video, and it has felt a little bit rough simply because it's my first time using the Miops trigger, the splash unit, and it's taken a bit of time for me to get used to it. And I'm hoping this is going to be my first of several videos. This one, just a little bit of a taster, me getting used to the setup, getting used to the timing. But I definitely want to spend a lot more time experimenting with different heights for the droplet, different times, different sizes, different colors, different fluidity in the water. I really want to see what it's like if I thicken that water up a little bit more. It's basically a whole genre of photography in itself, and I'm really excited to spend a bit more time diving into that. And even just this first taste has been great for me. It's definitely given me the bug to try a little bit more, and I hope it has given you some inspiration as well. But of course, you don't need the Miops kit if you don't want to spend that kind of money, if you're not sure if it's necessarily going to be something you want to do. You can do this the manual way, and I will leave a link to the video that I originally did in the description below. But thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, do please hit that like button, and of course consider subscribing to my channel if you don't already, and I will see you next time.